perfectly as far as organic growing is concerned. So include things that are around you. That's one of the best suggestions I would make to growers that are coming into the Caribbean, coming into different environments. Understand your environment. You know, understanding the past, what has happening over, what has happened over the years, as far as the patterns of weather, the different things that can happen. Like December, you would have maybe the frost coming through. That's very dangerous for your plants. So how do you prepare your plant for like this? And these things can be answered in nature. And as Andre just said, the local understanding and the understanding that people have from a long, long time ago. We have to get back to those understanding, not just these new ideas that has emerged in the latest planting strategies, but understanding how your grandfather used to plant. What did he use? Now, thinking about caterpillars, for example, what people used to use to get rid of their caterpillars or to prevent. They used to use burn ashes. I mean, in some type of ways. Think about termites for your plants. And this is one of the biggest problems we have here in the Caribbean. Termites, you plant your plant, something does eat from the ground up. You don't see this thing happen until you see this plant fall. So how do you control these things? Now, we are in technological advanced areas where if we want to use those ancient ways of treating or of protecting ourselves, we test what will the burnt ashes, what will it do to your plant? Can you use this for protection? So these are some of the stuff maybe we should have to go to get rid of some of these issues that we might have.
I'm gonna simplify everything for you that he says, because I'm a chef. I got the cheat code from a grower that was growing in Amsterdam at the time, that owned a seed shop that actually is a big grower in Spain. First thing he told me, find all the original strains you can. Take them to your country and plant them. I said, why do you mean plant them? He said, before you ever grow for a bud, plant them and breed the seeds there. I said, I didn't understand what he was talking about. Why would I breed the seed? And I want weed. I want weed. I want weed to smoke. I want weed to do whatever. He said, no. One thing you're going to learn about this plant, it's the smartest plant on earth. I said, what? He said, okay. Once you plant the plant here and breed it here, it's going to climatize itself. It's going to do everything it needs for it to work in this environment, in this area, no matter weather pattern, no matter what. I said, okay. I didn't really understand what he was talking about. So when I got here, the first thing I did was breed. All I was doing was breeding seeds, breeding, cross-breeding, breeding back to themselves. I was just trying all different styles of breeding. Then I took those seeds and I started planting them out, documenting their history, what strain did I match, or who I brought, where did I get it from, where it comes from, and then seeing how it behaved in my climate. Which plants were strong enough to deal with the environment, which ones gave the best flavor, which ones did not work in this environment at all. So once I did that, I got to learn more about the plant itself by breeding it, planting it back here, growing it, seeing the end product, then going back to see, all right, the original product from where it came from, is it close? Did it look the same? When I have people visit, I said, have you smoked this before? Did you, how much back to the original has it come? Now, with that, I learned other things in growing. Started learning about phenotypes, started learning. So I didn't come in knowing much. So when I learned it this way, it sparked everything, because I'm learning it from the base all the way back up to the finished product.
Andre, you're crushing it today, bro. Crushing it.
But you know what? These are the things I used to keep to myself, and I never wanted to tell anybody, because once you tell people,
sharing.
Yeah, because once you start telling people this now, it's like they're gonna see that you don't really need to do much. The plant does everything itself. And a lot of people think, oh, I'm so great, I'm this, I'm that. I'm like, no, you're not.
No, it's the
Drop
plant.
it
Let
over
me
there.
drop the science now to back up everything you just said.
Yeah.
So what Andre's talking about is epigenetics. And so the code of the plant, the DNA, is just zeros and ones on a computer. You know what I mean? It's just the code. The code responds to the environment and how the environment controls whether those light switches are on or off. Because basically every gene is kind of like a dimmer switch. It can be on a lot, it can be off, it can be on a little, right? And so the environment controls that stuff. And same thing in St. Vincent. It took us a year of breeding, of crossing stuff there that took 9 months to finish. Like, I was amazed. This stuff's getting 10 hours of light in the mountains and staying in vegetative phase for over 6 months. Like, this is insane, right? But once we hybridized 8-week and 7-week flowering strains with that stuff, selected for the pest resistance, then you start to grow that a couple of generations and it gets the proper epigenetics in place to sustain the environment. And this is also the reason that we've seen tissue culture be an absolute failure so far, in my opinion, in the cannabis space, because everybody talks about tissue culture giving the plant an epigenetic reset, meaning it sets it back to not having the proper triggers to respond to the environment. So when we did this to an OG Kush, for instance, it dropped the THC level by half. A couple generations later, it started to creep back up, but you know, there wasn't the pressure from the basically a massive amount of fertilizer that allowed the plant to then express those genes to the same level. So everything that you guys are saying is true. We do need to, however, make sure that we're combining this knowledge of things like epigenetics with the old school. Because what I can say is, as a Canadian farmer, nobody I know is doing what their grandpa was doing, right? So they have had to incorporate technology into their grows to keep up with the times and to maintain a profit margin. And we will see the same thing in third world countries as well. As these products become more standardized and more stabilized, those who can produce it more efficiently, more consistently, and more cost effective are going to be the ones that succeed. And technology definitely helps with that. So I hope we can all start to share these things, because a rising tide floats all the boats, guys, right? And this whole competition in the cannabis space, I'm the biggest, I'm the baddest, I'm the best, does not serve anyone. The plant is the best.
Absolutely.
Definitely right about that.
Darryl, I mean, I think, yeah, I use that phrase all the time, actually, a rising tide lifts all ships, because I think it's so necessary for us to understand, we're just a dot right now. This industry is a speck. It's nowhere near its potential. Nobody even knows, you know, when I started in 2016, that's when I started, very young in this industry. But, you know, all the projections for the size of it medicinally and the size of it from a consumer perspective, those are, every single year, they're dwarfed. They just keep changing the projections, because they understand that the plant and the medicine can have so many more impacts. It can be used in so many other ways. It can create jobs in so many other different offshoots of it, that they just, you know, the projections don't really make sense anymore, other than for us to understand that we're at the very beginning of something tremendous. And, you know, in the Caribbean and less developed countries, Darryl, that's what we say now. We don't say third world, by the way. It's less developed. You know, this is a fantastic opportunity for us to impact the lives of our populations in significant ways. And so it doesn't lend itself to being sort of silos of information when we can get together and expedite how quickly we can better learn and inform and get this sort of productivity into our space. Anyway, having said all that, I have to tell you, we've been getting some amazing questions and a ton of questions through the Q&A. So I want to just pivot to that a little bit and then see if we can get some of these answered, because I'm a little embarrassed to say, but I think some of them are better than ones I came up with. But first off, I'll go with the St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the Medicinal Cannabis Authority there. And they're asked, in terms of water requirements for cannabis, what is considered to be the appropriate volume of water for a cannabis plant on a daily basis? So I'll throw that out to whoever wants to grab hold of it.
I would say for forecasting and predicting ahead of time, I plan out for 1 gallon of water per plant per day. In saying that, I don't necessarily use that every day, and it depends on whether I'm growing in pots or bags or whether it's in an outdoor field. But for forecasting, I think 1 gallon a day is a safe bet. It also depends on the stage of the life cycle. A full flowering cannabis plant is going to take more water than a 6-week or a 4-week-old clone. But for a plant in flower, for forecasting, 1 gallon a day is what I try to forecast for.
Okay.
Paul, I love you, buddy, but you know, from a science perspective, we got to stop measuring per plant and start measuring per square meter.
Correct.
Because the reality, you know, that's 1 plant per square meter. Yeah, your reference.
No, it's less than that. For outdoor, I plant dense. I don't like to grow big plants. I'm basing that off of fabric pots in a greenhouse or in a tunnel. For an outdoor, it works out differently, and you have to do it per square foot.
Yeah, so once you get really into the numbers, you know, you can basically start to calculate how much the plants are transpiring during the day based on the heat and the humidity in the air. And then you can start to make these calculations. But Cole's quite right. Usually we're between 4 and 7 liters of water per square meter per day, depending on the season and stuff. But also, again, if I'm at a very high density, sometimes I plant really little plants that just come out and make colas, right? And so you're looking at, you know, probably in the range of 30 plants per square meter. Those ones are going to suck up a lot more water as well. The other thing to consider is, are you doing cover crops or not? You know, in St. Vincent, for instance, the one thing that I didn't think about was the wind, which you wouldn't think is a big issue, but it, you know, the first 2 greenhouses we put up, it ripped down, and I thought, not really being in that hurricane belt there, that we weren't going to face strong winds. But I tell you, it's windy every day, and the wind changes directions just like that. So we've had to put cover crops down to keep the dirt out of our flowers, and we keep grass and everything growing more like a living soil system, because otherwise, man, there's just dust in the plants at the end of it, no matter what you do. So it was, so there's a lot of things to consider. And so probably in St. Vincent, I would guess we're more up around 8 or 9 liters per square meter, but we get rainfall pretty regularly too.
I'd like to chime in on that. I don't, my computer.
Go on. Yeah.
Is my computer working? I don't know why it's not.
We're hearing you.
Oh, okay. So my thought on that is, in a completely controlled environment, I'm not talking outside, but if you're using cocoa core, let's say, for instance, in a 5-gallon pot, under a controlled environment for that genetic, it usually takes about 1 to 1.5 gallons every few days. And that's allowing a dry out time for deeper root penetration, obviously, into your soil, and also so that you can prevent root rot. So that's my thought.
Yeah, that's I 100% agree with you. I think that's a pretty standard number if you were doing a bell curve. Again, the factors that you have to consider outdoors, though, are the sun and the wind are going to increase the amount of water that you have to put down. But indoors, that's a very fair and accurate number. Yeah.
I have another question here from Casmin James. Growing in pots versus growing in the ground, pros and cons.
Well, pros and cons. Growing in pots, you have more control, but I don't think, actually, tell you the truth, I wouldn't say pros and cons. It's yeah, the grower should learn what he's doing with that, because they both have the same benefit. If you're using soil, natural soil, they'll both have the same benefit. Only thing that when you're growing in the pot, like I said, you just have more control. You can, if anything, you can move the plant or anything. That would be the biggest pro to have growing in a pot. Yeah, otherwise, it's pretty much the same.
just look at the agriculture industry. What do we grow in the dirt versus what do we grow in pots, right? And a tomato is a good example. You can grow a tomato in a field, but it's probably not going to be the same quality as if you grew it in a pot or in rock wool in a greenhouse. So, you know, that is the answer, I would say, is like large scale outdoor, you're just not going to achieve the same quality. But again, if you're doing an extraction or just going for the essential oils, the terpenes off of that or something, then that's a very easy way to do it. But pots for sure give you more control, especially with dehydration and runoff and all that.
That's a trick question because in Jamaica, people grow outdoors in pots.
And tires.
And tires. So, you know, it's just what the grower deems has more control over. I wouldn't say there's a pro and a con. Everyone should learn their environment and learn what they can use to their benefits. You know?
Yeah, I think growing in pots is a more recent way of having what you want. Now, you have seasons where you have to grow in pots and maybe inside, and you have places where people grow. You have to use pots because it's pure rocks. But what I think about growing in pots and growing in the soil, I am most spiritually inclined to this plant. And growing in the soil gives you a deep connection to a vertical flavor. Now, to achieve this flavor, and as a user of cannabis, and I have grown in pots and I've grown in the soil, but growing in the soil gives you this aroma, it gives you this taste, it gives you, when you get it perfect, that is, you know. And I must say, and this is what maybe changed the game. The cannabis requires 17 elements, and growing in pot doesn't mean that it's going to get the 17 elements. But growing in the soil, there are so many benefits from the soil, if we get it right, that is. So we capture all the 7 elements that the plant is required to grow, opposed to growing in the pots. Now, if you understand the grow, you can give the plant these 7 elements, or you give it the one that it's going to be missing from the pots, and you will get a perfect plant. But to me, growing in the soil is everything a Cannacure would want to have. If you want this vertical taste, this terpene, this flavor, this terpenoid, you know?
Now, you know, with what Ross said, I grow in living soil inside of a pot. I want the control, but I also want everything from my soil. So we build all of our own soils on site. I take those great, healthy, rich soils, I put them into a pot, and you still get the control from it.
All right, I have a question here, I think, from I wouldn't call it doesn't sound like a small farmer, but someone just doing their own thing. But this is Jody Marie out of Trinidad, and she asks, I'm struggling to grow. Does the plant need direct overhead light? What if it's getting light that is partially shaded by a large palm leaf? We have lots of sophisticated and lots of straightforward questions, so I want to just mix it up. So whoever wants to jump in on that.
Like a new grower. And what I suggest,
Chanta.
and before I go to that question, I would say, yeah, I would say the opportunity for especially people in the Caribbean. So most of our laws are giving us the opportunity to 5 plants, 4 plants, 10 plants. If you look across even the South American block or the Caribbean spaces. So the legal aspect of what's happening is that we have the opportunity to learn. And now someone is asking, how does it work? Now, if you're vegging, you need light. So you need almost overhead light. And I always say in the Caribbean, we don't need big extra light. We get so much looms from the sun for 12 hours. So we just need to maintain for the next 3 to 4 hours that the plant doesn't go into flower. So if you're going indoor, you don't need the light. You need 12 hours of darkness and 12 hours of light. So you're growing, and the light is just one aspect. Knowing what the plant needs, you need the nitrogen, you need the phosphorus, the potassium, or you can create a super soil, which you don't have to add anything, just grow the plants with light and it gives you a perfect plant.
So Biah, then, is there a need for
The answer, she needs to cut she needs to cut the bush from over the plant. Bottom line, she needs to cut the bush from over the plant. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, cannabis is a full sun plant. It is not a shade plant. But that being said, what Ross was discussing was the light cycles. You will need more than 12 hours to keep it in veg and under 12 hours in flower. But during those hours, it should have as much direct sunlight as possible, or an overhead light. Yeah.
So then, Darryl, is there a need for, I mean, I think you've answered this, but is there a need for daylight extension for field crops?
Typically, we're trying to do a very small veg phase in a greenhouse at least. You know, if you can, this is the other thing we haven't really talked about, is growing from seed versus growing from clone. And I know that there's certain spiritual and religious reasons for doing certain things as well, but most of the genetics out there in seed form are just not stabilized, right? They haven't been inbred for 7 to 9 generations to give them genetic stability. So there's still variation going on, and that's not necessarily such a bad thing, but on a commercial scale, when you're trying to give a customer Coca-Cola, basically, you know, you're trying to give them the exact same experience every time. It's difficult when farming. And so the more things that you can control, the better. And that's why cloning has been a key aspect of the industry and will continue to be for a number of years, I think. So when you're cloning these plants, a lot of them do need different vegetative cycles, but some of them, you know, we root and we put straight out in the field at very concentrated densities. And some of them really, if you don't give them 4 weeks of a vegetative cycle, even if that's just with a little bit of overhead light, and you know, you can use 15-watt LEDs now. It doesn't have to be a crazy expense. We've got farms that are even just using those outdoor lights from Walmart and stuff that just, you know, are outside house lights to light up the field enough to keep the plants in the vegetative mood. So, so yeah, I think it really matters on your genetics, but in most places, I always say your money's made in veg. And what I mean by that is once you go into the flowering phase, it's typically just a recipe. It's kind of like baking a cake at that point. You give the plants a very specific fertilizer regime for a number of weeks, and then you harvest. But what you put into that is what you get out of that, just like anything. And so if you put in a very healthy vegetative plant that has an optimized number of nodes on it to produce the proper bud structure that you want for that plant, that's what I would say is key. And so some plants we found 4 or 5 nodes is optimal. Some plants, if you don't go to 9, the yields are reduced and the THC content's reduced. So it is very important to start to, and as Andre said, when you start out, try different things. Plant plants at different densities. Use different genetics from different places. Hybridize the ones that work good, and then you'll find something that works for you. If you want to then genetically stabilize that, give me a call. We'll tell you how to do it. But it does take, you know, 7 to 9 generations. So we're talking at least 3 years of very strict work to create an actual strain, you know, an actual variety, not just a hybrid.
Let me throw a question here.
I'd like to chime in, Doc. Doc, I wanted to answer something that Doc said. What Doc said about the seed, that's how we should treat the business. A lot of people are trying to skip steps. Like, if you're coming to a new country and you're starting a business here that hasn't been here, you can't, just because you're coming from somewhere else with the knowledge, you can't skip the steps. In Jamaica, a lot of businesses are trying to skip the steps. If we come in and we say we start from the ground up, meaning that we're breeding, we're looking for something beautiful, because we can have 100 people breeding all over the island and everybody looking for something different and specific from what their area or their microclimate that they're in. So you can't come in and try to, like the cookie cutter, it hurts my heart because the formula is there. It's been there. It's been there forever. If you're coming in and treating it just like the seed, you're planting it, you're looking for what's working, and then you keep on going to the next step. That's what's the shooting Jamaica in the foot. We want that cookie cutter, and Jamaica is not a cookie cutter country, none at all, because nothing, you can't cookie cutter nothing here. You have to come and just start like everything grassroots. If you don't start it from the grassroots up, it's not gonna work.
Out of many one.
Yo, Doc, man, be tight.
I want us to jump into nutrients in a minute, but before we get to that, if I could just get your different thoughts on this. You know, we want to, there's a real desire, and I think responsibility to engage a small farmer, right? This is not about just getting large enterprises to come in and commercialize this and skipping over a whole set of folks who, you know, can directly impact as well as have some of the knowledge that we've been talking about on this webinar, right, for many years. But here's my question to you. Number one is, how do you think new jurisdictions can incorporate the small farmer into this new industry? That's number one. And number two, in terms of guidance for that small farmer, because I think what we've seen here in Jamaica, at least from my qualitative observation, is tremendous challenges in scaling. Right, you have people who've been growing for years, and so de facto experts at growing. Right, their knowledge have been doing this for a long time. They've grown good quality product, et cetera, et cetera. But now that they've gone to commercial, size cultivation facilities, they're having incredible challenges in terms of, I'm hearing a lot about molds and other, pests, pest management, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a two-part thing. I'd love to get your different thoughts on real quickly. But number one is, how do we open this up and really facilitate small farmers getting involved? And then number two is, what are some of the warning signs or early points in terms of moving to that scalable solution that we've seen be a challenge here in Jamaica?
All right, well, I'll jump in on that. Any of these countries now pushing towards legalization, the first thing they should do is set up a program for small farmers. All these individuals who have been persecuted for years and years for growing this plant and sticking to it for whatever reason they're growing, whether it be spiritual, whether it be a financial reason, or just love of the plant, they need to have the first opportunity to be able to grow it. So, it doesn't take a country, it doesn't cost them a lot of money to divvy out a little piece of land and say, all right, for our local farmers, for the ones that have been doing this for years, you take this land. And I don't want to be too critical of Jamaica on a public platform, but they dropped the ball on that.
Fine, I'll be critical of Canada. Canada fucked this entire industry up, period. We did not set the example. We did not set the precedent. We destroyed a beautiful industry that was operating as a beautiful free market industry that the only thing the government had to do was slap a storefront on and allow to operate. And now, 7 years later in Canada, they're finally giving out craft licenses, and it's these craft guys that are going to rule the game, okay? Mm-hmm. So it's embarrassing to me that Canada is held as the example when it should be the example of over-regulation, of how to bring people in that have no business in this industry, that have no knowledge of this industry, that have no love for the plant and don't care about the medicine, period. And they screwed it up. And so now what we have the opportunity to do is bring those craft guys back in. And what we need to do is set up cooperatives where certain craft growers are growing the same genetics in the same way, so that there still is supply chain and there still is quality on the market, and we're not putting all our eggs in one basket, so to speak. And when you set up these farmer collectives, these co-ops, when one farmer gets a bad crop and one farmer gets a great crop, everybody benefits. And this way we don't have bankruptcies from every little guy. And now we're seeing craft guys getting licensed in Canada in under 6 weeks. It's amazing. And it's the only thing they should have done at the beginning was license the black market and give them stores. That's it. The quality control, I agree, had to come in to make sure people aren't getting sick, but nobody's getting sick off weed anyways. You're smoking it. It kills all the E. coli and shit anyways, Like California had a medical program for 25 years. No testing, almost no illnesses, right? Like almost no even reported side effects. So can we just get rid of most of the regulations and treat it like a goddamn tomato, right? Like it doesn't, it's no different.
Well, Doc, I got a simpler one because I've seen this work in other places like in Amsterdam, and I think they were doing this in the beginning in Colorado. Well, if you are a traditional guy, give me an opportunity to put my quality bud on the market. Meaning that if you have a dispensary or something, they used to have a separate door for when people come in that want to sell you bud. Now in Amsterdam, you know it's still illegal, but the little nifty grower has a chance to go to a coffee shop and say, "Sir, I have a quality key of herb. Would you like to purchase it?"
The problem with that is the government doesn't get their cut, right? So they got to be able to put
they
their
do. They would get their cut because I'm selling it to the I'm selling it to I'm a small grower. I'm selling 1 or 2
people
pounds
that sell
to the
weed are not
dispensary.
traditionally honest. So you know what I mean? Like that's
I'm just saying.
problem.
I'm just saying. I'm selling it to the dispensary, and the dispensary is selling it back. So how he's not getting a piece of his tax money? Oh, you mean out of my pocket, the grower?
Look, I agree.
I'm
The
buying
only
products.
thing the government had to
I'm
do is
buying products. I'm shopping. I'm shopping every day. I'm out there. I'm out there living a life. So taxes definitely do come around, and income spending goes up.
Yeah, they just had to come in and basically slap the QA stickers in the middle there, in my opinion, just to make sure that it was approved, right? If you want to have farmers market and sell your weed at a farmer's market and everybody knows that this is like, then
No,
that's one.
not a farmer's market, Doc. I'm just saying it, selling
Yeah,
it
no,
back to,
if you want to be in a
to the
store, though,
dispensary.
that's right. If you want to be in a store, it should be like a tomato and it should have to go through some sort of quality protocol, right?
Yes.
And that's the only place that the government, in my opinion, had any business regulating or taxing cannabis, was around the quality assurance.
Well, when you bring, all right, let me give you an example. When you bring the bud in to the location, right? They have it's like a big old magnifying glass with lights in it. They check in the bud. The guy goes back. He comes out with his lighter. He burns it. He's like, all right, is there a lot of? He could tell, is there too much fertilizer in this? And he's so they run their whole little test.
Dude, that's way more quality assurance than the Canadians are doing. We just
okay then. So if you're doing that at the dispensary, now the little man can come in with his bud. And I mentioned this to a couple of people in the government in Jamaica, and I said, this right here would flatten the line, because once a man can grow something at home and bring it into the dispensary and say, all right, here's my quality, and you write up your slip and you get your tax money. He gets a little money to go and spend some more money on the street. I think that's it works. It would just crush everything, flatten the line. Everybody, why am I using flatten the line? This is not covert. I'm just saying, it would just be the perfect thing to come in. That would work. The small grower, how could the small grower be upset? I wouldn't be upset. If I can bring 2 pounds into the dispensary and sell it to the dispensary, and I know I can go pay my rent, I can go shopping, go buy food, take care of my kids. Yep, school fee. Oh my God, school fee. You know what I'm saying? So that idea right there, I think that idea should be floated out there more. Because if you want to go license every small farmer, some of these small farmers don't want you to know their business. You understand me? It's not everybody that's want to be licensed.
I don't think we want more on cannabis until anybody can plant a cannabis plant anywhere, anytime. The sale of it, I 100% think is going to have to be regulated for a number of years. The government gets their cut, but the cultivation should be freed up 100%.
I want to move on because we have 15 minutes left, and then we have a ton more questions here, and some other topics I want to just catch on. So let me see if I can speed up. Rastafari, before we jump on, did you have anything on that particular topic you wanted to contribute?
Yeah, I want to say, so especially here in Jamaica, we have this industry been here for a very, very long time. The cannabis industry, especially how the Rastafari people deals with cannabis as a sacrament. Now, when the whole legal system started from 2008, the system is concentrating on regulating the economy, the industry. Now, they haven't been focusing on what has been happening. what industry had to offer to especially Jamaica and the world. So if this was taken into consideration, I think this would play one of the most major parts in the industry today. There is a black market. We think about it not, and it's booming. So this is something that should be paid attention to. And for this industry that has been going on, these are the traditional growers. Now, how does these people get involved in the industry? Firstly, we have to understand the standards. Now, it is standardized now, the cannabis. So we're looking at medicinal and we're looking at therapeutic. So what kind of standards do we have to meet to put our cannabis or our flower products here? Now, as I've said before, this is a perfect training session. If everyone could go ahead, get the tutorials of how to grow their 5 plants, and in communities, people coming together, understand how to grow these plants. That means when they're going to grow 1,000 plants, it's almost the same, because you understand to do 5. Then you can understand how to 100, and then you understand how to grow a big deal. Some of these issues we face them with small plants also, small numbers of plants. And if we're going to look at growing a big deal in a community effort, which, as it has been said, which we could use this community effort, this whole big book, to put towards the industry, sell to dispensers, sell to processors. It would be better for the original people, the people that have kept this economy for so long.
Okay, thanks,
Let
Rastafari.
the small farmer sell to the dispensary.
All right, Jay, we heard you. All 18 times.
Only 18? Oh man,
Yeah.
I'm under my numbers. I'm under my numbers.
Again, I want to touch on nutrients, but before I do that, I want to come back to something Darryl said earlier, and I think a couple of you have also mentioned, and then I want to contrast that. So, Darryl, you talked about outdoor in the context of Jamaica and other markets, and then you mentioned Trinidad with its very low cost of energy. One of the key things we've talked about today so far is the number of variables that are involved in a successful crop. So I want to throw out to you, and I'll ask Suzie to speak on this first, because in looking at an indoor solution, right, how does that impact the number of variables that are subject to impact that crop, right? And does that make it a simpler solution? And then throw it out to everyone just to sort of give your thoughts in terms of indoor and outdoor, very briefly, pros and cons. So if we can start with you, Suzie, on that. Hello? Suzie, you're muted. You're muted. Have to start over.
Oh, okay. So sorry about that. So when you're talking about growing indoor, you're talking about more control over your crop. So we talked a little bit, I've talked with a couple of the panelists before about some of the things you guys are dealing with currently in Jamaica, and you said it was an exceptional rainy